Hi everyone, I hope this video finds you well and happy, and for those of you who are either just going back or have just gone back to school or to nursery, I hope you are doing very well. If you've been working through the summer or you've been back a while, I still hope you're doing well, but you might need a little bit more energy than the rest of us. Anyway, it's lovely to have you here today. If you've been following my social media, you've noticed I've started to post some things like blogs. I'm also going to be releasing some podcasts very soon, but I'm also going to be releasing these videos on Facebook and YouTube. Essentially just little snippets of CPD, things that you might want to consider, things that are quite topical and relevant based on my post, but also what other people are talking about at the moment. For today's video, I want to talk to you a little bit about culture. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know that I talk quite extensively about the importance of tuning into the individual and unique culture that you have in your setting. To some extent, I've covered this probably for about 7 or 8 years now. I also talk about it in the context of telling your story if you ever come to my conferences or bigger training days. But I want to kind of boil it down a little bit for this video. If you want to find out more about culture, you can of course go to my blog and follow through to watch the link about culture. It's a longer video available on YouTube. But for today's video, I do want to just boil it down to a few key points about things that you need to know about, especially this time of the year as you're welcoming new children into your setting. I'm hoping that you know a little bit about the children coming to you. I'm hoping that you've either been able to do something like a home visit or gather things like home visit forms or getting to know you forms, or perhaps you've had some transition days before the summer holidays. Not all of us are lucky enough to be in that position, so I appreciate that's not always going to work. But if you have welcomed your children back, I'm hoping you've spent some time in the provision with them and perhaps got to know them a little bit better by now. And I'm also hoping that potentially through that transition period where children are settling in, you've been able to have some conversations with parents. Now is the time to think quite carefully about the continuous provision that you've already established. I want you to think quite carefully about what children's experiences are to date. For those of you who are teaching reception, you are essentially inheriting the COVID generation, so those children might have missed out on some of the key opportunities they should have had as newborn babies. However, if you're working in a preschool or younger, you still have children who have been impacted by the pandemic, as well as impacted by the cost of living crisis and other things. So potentially some of your children might not have had experiences that you would have liked them to have had. And I'm not talking about going on a holiday or going on a plane or a bus or a train. Those things are important, but I'm also talking about simple things such as going to a shop and buying things, perhaps paying for cash for something, going to a park, going to a pub, going to a cafe, going to any of the things that are part of the local culture where the children come from. If you can tune into what those experiences are that they have had and they haven't had, that's a really good place for you to start building your continuous provision off of. If you know that all of your children have been to a local park or local museum or gallery, you can begin to incorporate elements of those things into your provision, whether that's through conversation or through resources that you provide. Where children haven't had those experiences, we're not going to think of it as a sort of a doom and gloom thing. We're not thinking it as a deficit model approach here. We're going to think, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build those things in as enhancements or experiences that I'll provide to the children as we go through the year. I'm hoping you've also been able to have a conversation or tune into the kinds of toys or play styles that your children are bringing with them into the setting. I had a really great coaching session this morning with one of my international schools, and we talked at length about the new children who were coming in and how many of them were quite active, quite physical children. And I asked her to unpick that a little bit, and what she meant by that was some of the children were engaging in far more gross motor activities than some of the other children were who have been with the school for the previous year. So if you've got children coming to you and you know from home visits that perhaps they play a lot in the gardens or perhaps in parks or on the street, perhaps you've got children who are the opposite, perhaps children who have a lot of screen time, who have a lot of small play rather than gross motor play. We need to respond to that aspect of our culture, that uniqueness, and think, okay, if we've got lots of children who are very active and physical and their play styles are rooted in risky play or physical play, perhaps I can establish that in my provision. That might be creating a much larger construction area with large equipment, large apparatus, tape, masking tape, boxes, sheets, bits of paper, things like that. It could be that you've got children who potentially prefer to have more solitary play, singular play, smaller play, and it could be that you provide opportunities for them to take things individually into little spaces for them to play with them there. Something in lots of containers, bags and boxes, and those kinds of things. If you've got children who are very interested in climbing trees, running around, are you incorporating that? Are you meeting the children where they're currently at? And the last point here is to think about your adults, because I imagine some of you have probably got a slightly different team this year. If you're very fortunate enough to have the same team as last year, I hope it's a good thing. I'm sure it is. But if you've got the same team as last year, you know the staff around you very well. But the chances are there's probably new staff members with you. And it's really important to think about what their hobbies and their interests are. And I say that because when it comes to implementing our curriculum, we also want to supplement that with things that we find interesting, that we find exciting, that we can talk about. Our passions, the things that drive us. So if you're really interested in gardening, if you're interested in fashion and beauty, in cars and football, whatever you're interested in, have you had conversations as a team about that? And have you thought about bringing those out into the provision? Perhaps if you're interested in football, can you establish more equipment outdoors for children to play with football? If you're into gardening like I am, are you able to source a few extra bits and pieces for gardening and have those available so that you can then teach and model and share that passion with the children? The reason I pulled these bits out, is because this is all about relationships. This is really focusing on children and adults. And at this time of year, we are really pushing as hard as possible to establish friendships and long-lasting relationships with our children. And we can find this information out quite easily by spending as much time with them as possible. Your continuous provision, i.e. the things that you have every day, need to be informed by what you know about the children, the community, the school, the setting, all those different things. But the focus should always be about what you know about the children and how we can help them to make sense of what's around them quickly and to build and learn new things quite quickly. I hope this video has been useful. Please do check out my podcast and the other things that I'm producing at the moment. I'm putting quite a lot of effort into these things because I fully appreciate at the moment we've got such an interesting, diverse workforce. Many of the people who I work with now are quite new to early years, and there's quite a lot of things to get to know, so I'm hoping these videos and podcasts are very useful for you. But if you're a leader or a more seasoned practitioner, I also hope they're a bit of a refresher and potentially even a debating point. If you don't agree or you think I haven't gone deep enough, please do comment, let me know. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Stay safe everyone, and I'll catch you for the next video in a few weeks.